Welcome back to Winning the Room. We're sitting with Jess Scully in this episode, the former Deputy Lord Mayor of Sydney, and we're talking about community, what it is and why it matters. Let's talk community. When I first moved to New York, I was living Midtown, pretty average place to live, but quite fun. And one day I went to meet a friend downtown, got on the train, got off at Spring Street. And as soon as I came out of the train station, felt a little different. 45 minutes into that experience, I literally went to my friend. I said, you know what? I need to move to Soho. These are my people.
Yeah.
This is my, in inverted commas, community.
Yeah.
I then lived there for 10 years and it was true. It was where I needed to be. Is that community? And if it isn't, what is the definition of community?
It's a tough question. It's one of those things that, like your experience, you know it when you feel it, right? It's a feeling of connection, I think is what community is. It's a feeling of being seen and seeing and feeling like there's something that's understood or shared by the people that you're with. And that could be shared values. It could be, like when you're in your 20s, you're a teenager, you fall into music scenes and they become your whole life. And that's your community. It's a shared aesthetic or a shared sense of what's beautiful or what motivates you or an expression that it feels true and connects you. When you're older, maybe it's being part of a particular activity group, maybe it's a sports team, maybe it's some kind of neighborhood-centered activity that brings people together, like communities of place are really important. So I sort of define communities as being communities of place, where you're connected because you're neighbours. You're connected because you're passionate and care about the same place, and something attracts all of you to that one place. I see communities of passion being like those music subcultures or the creative subcultures, like people who are really into anime, for example, people who are really into particular aesthetic subcultures. These are communities of passion. And then there's also communities of identity. So they're communities where there's a cultural link that binds us. There's a shared story of our history that brings us together around community. And then there are other communities as well, which are communities, I guess, of intention. Communities where we have a shared goal, or we perceive a shared problem or opportunity or threat. And we, despite our kind of differences in our community of identity or our community of place, we connect around that issue. And so we work together and we build a community of shared values and shared intention to solve a problem or to open up an opportunity.
Okay, so it sounds like some of those are quite, intuitive or just natural, that just happen organically. And maybe if I go through that spectrum, the last one where, hey, we're on a mission together.
Yes.
That feels a bit designed.
Yes.
Is that the spectrum, do you think? Sort of organic, by chance, all the way through to designed and intentional? Do you categorize it along that spectrum, or is that not useful?
I think they're all a little bit of that. They all have elements of being intentional or sort of opportunistic or accidental. So I'm not accidentally in a community because I live in a place. I'm drawn to the same sort of things about the place where I live versus the place where you live, right? So there's something that there are underlying values that are bringing us to that place. But sometimes people fall into these communities of intention as well. Like they might never have perceived themselves as being activists or campaigners or advocates, but they're really pissed off about what this is going to do to their kids or their neighborhood, or they are frustrated that they can't believe that this great opportunity isn't being pursued. And suddenly they might find themselves being in a community of intention or a community of activism.
Feels like there's a lot to be pissed off about at the moment.
We are rich in crisis.
Yeah.
You would be born at the right time in history if you like solving problems.
Correct. Correct. So does that mean community is more important right now than ever, or?
Yeah. I think community is really important for two reasons. Those, we are social animals. We're political animals is how Aristotle described us. That just means that we're the only animals that desire to live with people beyond our family units. We want to learn from and connect with each other. That's just a fundamental human need. So community is really important because it's a way of meeting that fundamental human need of belonging, of connecting, of learning from each other. But community is also really important because community is about power. Community is about collective action and shared focus, energy, intention, putting our collective efforts and skills together to try and take on something that's big, to try and change systems, or to try and shape a future that we could be excited about.
Yeah. I don't want to come off negative, but it just feels like groups of everyday people in communities seem to have less power right now. It seems like less can be done through community, which I think is a real shame, but it feels like that's true. What do you think about that? I mean, clearly you've got lots of experience in this area.
Mm-hmm. I think it's very natural to feel that way. I think we're living in this moment in history where it feels like you're not just, if you're unhappy with something, you don't just have to advocate against, your local government or your national government. We're dealing with these global corporations in sectors that span beyond the borders of any one nation or any one jurisdiction. We feel like we're in this moment where a lot of the power structures and a lot of the dynamics that shape our world are unseeable or unknowable. They're kind of too complex, too technological. They're inside a black box of AI or technology, for example, where even the creators don't really know how to harness or manage these Frankenstein's monsters that they've created. So I think it's totally normal and rational for people to feel disempowered at the moment. But having said that, I think we all deeply underestimate the power of our own agency. And we all deeply underestimate the power that we have when we work together. Because you don't have to have all the solutions. You just have to find other people who are motivated around the same problems. And together, you have more than the sum of the parts in terms of the impact that you can have and the influence you can have. But it takes work and it takes time. And we're all pretty time poor right now.
Yeah. When I reflect on my own business career, I've definitely had periods of my career where I've been, gathering people and working on projects and doing all the right stuff. And then what actually moves the needle is one connection with one person, someone who's able to move the piece on the chessboard, right? The rest of us are doing all the good stuff, able, intelligent, passionate people. But then some people, they seem to have more agency in this community changing way.
I can empathize with that. I think I've had that experience too. But I think what you're doing there is you're discounting all of that work that you did before. Before you got to that moment where you met that linchpin, where you met that motivated agent, you were building a logic to the problem or to the opportunity that you were trying to solve. You were bringing people together with a diverse skill set or with diverse connections who could connect you into ways to solve that problem. And maybe you got lucky that you found that one person, but maybe there was someone else in that network or that community who had access to someone else who could play that linchpin role. So I think we have been so confused and distracted by the hero's journey as a framing for how problems are solved. And no great social justice campaign was ever achieved because there was one really excellent speaker who could motivate people. No civil rights movement ever happened because there was just one person elected who solved all the problems.
Why do we do that? Because that is the narrative.
Because it's a good story. And it's easy
Is that
to tell.
as simple as that?
Totally. I mean, so much about the human experience is about being able to tell a good story, right?
Yeah.
And it's such an easy story to tell, to talk about Superman or Clark Kent. It's such an easy story to say Martin Luther King Jr. Brought about the civil rights movement in the US, when we know historically that's not the case. it's so much harder to tell a nuanced, complicated, complex story of a lot of different people finding their voice and finding their agency, connecting with each other and working towards a shared end. But that's the real story of how any change has ever happened.
So if you're talking to young people, someone, I don't know, leaving university, about to take their first job, what could they do to get involved with community but not get too distracted, right? I mean, there's only so many hours in the day. You want to start your career.
Yeah.
You want to move up, whatever you're trying to achieve in your life. What are a few things they could do just to engage with community?
Yeah. I think the thing that's really hard is that, for people like you and me, we had the benefit of having 20, 30 years in our various fields to build those relationships in mostly an analog world, right? Where we would bump into people, we'd go to parties, we'd meet other people, we'd go to events, and you have that face-to-face dynamic. And I think that is so critical to building human relationships, right? So we've had the benefit of all of that. And there is a new generation, there are a couple of new generations who are coming up who have probably had more of a digitally mediated experience, which in some way is really powerful in helping to connect you to communities of passion and communities around things that you're interested in. But in some other ways is kind of disabling because you don't get the potency of the human connection. You don't get the serendipity of the incidental side conversations that you have that are what really build relationship, right? So what I would say to a young person is all of those little things around the edges of your passions and your story and your career, that's what gives you connection to other people, and not to pursue it in a sort of transactional, networky kind of way, but building human relationships is the most valuable thing that you can do in your life and in your career.
Yeah.
And those sort of accidental, incidental opportunities to connect with other people, they come about because you're not looking at your phone. They come about because you're looking at someone in the eyes. You're talking to someone at the entrance to the event. In the old days, you'd be in the smoking section and you'd talk to somebody and you would make a connection and there'd be something there that you could build on. And not all of them are going to be your best friends forever, but there are all these small, weak links that help connect you into other people. And through them, you can find other communities that you can be connected to.
Yeah, hearing that, it sounds like location and physicality was very important. I think it's interesting to observe now live events, meetups, brands are getting people together in one location and really driving that physical location thing. It's funny to see that come all the way back around. Obviously, digitally dispersed now, but smart brands are doing that. Is that why they're doing it, to bring that focus back?
I think as much as we live a digital life and as empowering as it can be to meet someone and instantly connect with them and maintain that connection over time, we are embodied beings. We live in a place, we feel connected in a place, we have political agency in a place. It's all about being in the place and being connected to the place. So those are some of the most important and fundamental communities we can be a part of. So I think it really makes sense that we come back to place and we understand how important that is. And it's interesting that brands are recognizing that as well, because I think there's something unquantifiable, ineffable about the immediacy of human connection. When you meet someone, there's all of these subconscious clues and stories and ideas that are percolating in your mind and ways for you to connect. You might talk about someone's shoes. You might talk about somebody's haircut. You might ask them what they were doing before they got there. There's all these other ways of building connections that you just can't do like on a social media feed, on a Zoom call. You've got to be physically with people to do that.
Yeah, and the location, right? Like the actual environment as well. Yeah, one that comes to mind is Skims, Kim Kardashian's brand.
Oh, yeah.
If you know it,
Yeah.
interesting brand, clearly killing it. 100% digital. They just did an event where they created a Skims diner.
Right.
And so this was a diner, I think it was in LA, and everything from the menu to the decor, absolutely everything was Skimsified. And, obviously lines down the block, incredible. That then became a huge digital moment as well. But again, they invested in a real location-based physical moment. And again, I think it's trying to drive that community around the brand. Thinking of that, how important is it for cities or real communities, capital C communities, to create those places? I'm sure it's hugely important, but
It's so important. I mean, we've got to have places, not just communities that we feel that we belong to, but places where we feel we belong. And I think when a brand creates an activation, for example, it's giving people an opportunity to go and self-identify as being a part of that community. It's a place to create those accidental connections and opportunities to build real life connections with other people. So I can understand why a brand would do that. For a city, for a place-based community, you need to have so many different places and opportunities for people to feel like they belong, to get a toehold into the sometimes overwhelming diversity of places that exist within a community. And that's harder and harder. I think there are generations of people who feel shut out of cities because of the housing crisis. And when you do that, you disenfranchise people from the society, and that is so dangerous politically. It's so dangerous to stability and to the ongoing idea of free Western or what democratic liberal, whatever you want to call the kind of order that we live in. This idea that we can each have individual freedoms and individual agency, the idea that we are collaborators in a society that equally represents our interests, the idea that we govern ourselves and we're not governed by bosses or autocrats. All of that hinges on people feeling like they belong to the project. And the more that we shut people physically out of living together in these places, the more that we erode that shared prospect.
Yeah. And to me, it feels like that level of belonging and having an impact on the greater community on an individual basis, that feels like that's being eroded. And I'm sure it's a big answer, but what are a few things we could do to start to reverse that? How could we redesign? I know it's a big question.
Oh my God, it's my favorite question.
I need to have a lot of thoughts on it.
I mean, how long we got?
As long as you know.
I mean, this is the thing this is the most exciting problem for me of our time, right? So we have allowed a certain kind of logic, this extractivist logic, this logic of accumulation, this logic of kind of dog eat dog, everyone's out for themselves. We've allowed that to run its course. And here we are. We're in this moment of extreme political polarization. We're in this moment where we are exhausting to breaking point the ecosystems that we require to survive. And we're in this moment where so many people are disenfranchised and kicked out of the system that they're supposed to be a part of, right? So we can only fix things in every direction. So that excites me. But I think the number one thing that we have to do is inspire people with the sense of their own agency. And not just individual agency, but collective agency. That together, you and I can do more than you or I could do individually. And that our problems are shared problems. It's not just that I haven't hustled hard enough, that the system is not working for me, right? There is no amount of hustle culture that is going to get us collectively out of this problem that we're in, or these many problems we're in. This polycrisis is what people are calling this moment that we're in.
Do you say polycrisis?
Polycrisis.
What does that mean?
The polycrisis is the collapse.
I like it.
It's climate change.
Right,
It's political polarization. It's mass migration. It is the undermining of truth.
So a cluster problem.
Cluster problem is a nice way of putting it. That's the polite way of putting it, JP.
Yeah.
We're in a cluster problem.
Yeah. It does feel that way.
Yeah.
Here, globally, it's every problem seems to be running right now.
Yeah. But for me, the way that you start to unpick all of these problems is to give people a sense of their own agency, give them tools to collaborate together, and then, and this is really critical, give them tools to reach points of consensus rather than points of opposition.
Mm.
And so there are technological tools and there are really interesting people working on these problems around the world. And they're seeking to help people find bridging statements, places where we agree, and then to rebuild consensus from those places where we agree, rather than if you were to use something like a Facebook or a
Mm.
Twitter or X or whatever to try and have a discussion or have a discourse about the world. Those platforms are incentivized to create opposition and polarization. All of the financial incentives encourage them to get people to fight each other.
Yeah.
There are
But
alternatives.
why are they doing that? Because
Why?
that's what people want to do.
No, that is because that's what grabs people's attention.
Okay.
That's not what people want to do. When you think about it from a kind of base, animalistic, instinctive level, you arc up when there's a risk, when there's a danger, when there's a threat. So you're almost kind of tapping into people's fight or flight, fear senses, and you're exploiting that, which just leads to exhaustion and apathy in the end, and people feeling like they could never agree with their neighbors. But actually, humans are social animals. We're collaborative rather than competitive animals. The reason that we're here at this level of evolution is because we built societies and worked together. So I would argue that that is a much more fundamental human trait than the kind of conflict-driven idea of human evolution. And there's been a lot of work on this already. Rutger Bregman wrote a really interesting book about this idea called Humankind, which was really about the fact that we're collaborative and social, and that has been the X factor of humanity, not our dog-eat-dog, ruthless competitive instinct.
Yeah, interesting. I don't know. When I think about capitalism, when I think about any of these big businesses, whether we like them or not, that have really made a dent, you mentioned a bunch, Meta, Google, these types of businesses. I mean, it's based on pure competitiveness. It's based on getting people to really disagree and then form tribes and then feed those two tribes. Like, that seems to be the basic business model of these companies.
Oh, absolutely. And look at what it's got us.
Mm.
I mean, it's got populations that uh, fundamentally have different pictures of reality. And you can't build a sustainable future based on that.
Mm.
And it's not a very nice place to live. And I think if you think about the kind of environment that you want to raise your kids in, when you think about the kind of place where you want to grow old, if you think about the kind of future that is sustaining and worth looking forward to, it isn't dog eat dog. It isn't being suspicious of your neighbor. It isn't thinking that the person who just arrived on the plane or the boat is here to take your job and is the enemy. You know, we get so much more out of belonging. We get so much more out of being part of the solution. But we haven't cultivated those environments, those techniques, those skill sets, or the platforms that help us appeal to that better inner nature that we all have.
Yeah. If I could use an analogy, it sounds like what you're talking about is akin to vegetables, right? At first, I'm not sure. After a while, you actually like them, and then you get all the great benefits from eating vegetables. But fast food it's pretty tempting. I mean, not for me personally, but there's a reason why people eat that fast food. Feels great immediately, but then you get the massive decline. Is it? Is that relevant or interesting? Because it sounds like, like I'm buying to what you're saying. Sounds like more work, more generosity, more openness. I don't know. I mean, are we really able to do that? And I'm sure we are in I don't know, a science way. But anyway, look, it reminds me, I was speaking to a futurist many years ago before AI was huge. And he was basically saying, what's going to happen is there's going to be a few companies that are going to be running the world. There's going to be very, very few people that have all the money, and no one's going to have to work. In many ways, could be interesting. But the problem is the people at the top won't share. We won't dole out money in a way that would be respectful and give people a proper life they can live. No, we will hold it all up top and then just drip feed in a very selfish, greedy way. And of course, then everybody will revolt and argue, and then security will become the biggest industry to protect this group above. It's a long story. My point is, maybe human nature is a little bit greedy and a little bit competitive. And I don't know, I'm just putting it out there as another thought. I hope I'm wrong, but
Well, I think what you're describing
is America. But
is
yeah,
the
I don't know. It
is
feels like
the arc of development of many civilizations, right? So the situation we're in is novel in that we have these multiple aspects to the polycrisis, but not exceptional in that this has occurred many times throughout history. And so there's a really great book by a philosopher called Roman Krasnarek. It's called History for Tomorrow. And in History for Tomorrow, he's looked at all of these examples from history and said, well, this experience of ecosystemic collapse, for example, was something that was experienced in Edo era Japan. And the only thing that changed that culture was people deciding to live differently, finding a way to change those rules so that people would live differently. This experience that we're living at the moment of the tech overlords in the US that are hoarding people's data and kind of leading to extreme market concentration. This is very similar to the robber barons of the late 19th century, for example. And what happened in all of those instances was people rose up. You had social movements of people who rose up, often diverse social movements. You had new ideas that were put forward, new policy proposals that said, actually, it doesn't need to be this way. Actually, there are different ways to organize and distribute the benefits of this new technological arrangement, for example. And then you had a story that connected those ideas and those movements with the crisis. And this is something that Krasnarek calls the disruption nexus. Basically, it's this perfect dynamic between these elements. And when you get those elements together, when you can connect the problem that you're facing with the opportunity of the ideas and the passion and the intensity and urgency of the movements, that's when you get social change, and you have to reset that dynamic. So yes, there is something perhaps inherently human about some people's quest to dominate. There's the development of elites in some instances, but also common in our history is the collaboration of people and the opportunity and the urgency for people to come up with new ways of distributing resources and setting rules and creating regulation and humanizing some of those more inhumane instincts that emerge.
Thanks for listening to this episode. It's a really important conversation that needs to happen, and you can find us anywhere where you get high-quality podcasts. If you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did, make sure you check out the next episode.